Before I launch into another diatribe on identity politics, I want to make sure that you understand I'm getting pushback from surprising places. That's all I'm going to say about it right now. Some reliably progressive people are wondering if direct democracy is such a good idea. I've talked about Mike Gravel's plan. I've described how things work in Switzerland, for example. But some reliable revolutionaries are saying, hey, wait, maybe the people are not qualified to govern themselves. Get your popcorn out, folks. This may prove interesting. And I will definitely name names as things progress. So I've been waiting for the right moment to launch this piece. MSM already helping next administration hide corruption under diversity banner. So we already know how the Biden team, and the Clinton team for that matter, use diversity to disguise neoliberalism. And we already know that mainstream media are helping the Democrats, other than Fox News. Caitlin's article starts with the New York Times. Could limiting corporate candidates hurt Biden's diversity push? Narrowing the candidate pool may not lead to the diverse representation the incoming administration is seeking. So what are they seeking? Do they want to help the working poor, or do they want to have a diverse cabinet? If you've been following this show, you already know the answer. There has never been a better time to be a woman, minority, or member of the LGBT community who works in the DC establishment and thinks the poor should be made into pet food. The New York Times has published an article titled, Could Limiting Corporate Candidates Hurt Biden's Diversity Push? For the benefit of all those normal, everyday readers who've been lying awake at night wondering if limiting corporate candidates might hurt Biden's diversity push. The article's authors warn against the non-existent, completely imaginary threat of the next presidential administration rejecting corporatists for cabinet positions to appease the Democratic Party's progressive wing, claiming that doing so would be narrowing the candidate pool in a way that hurts Biden's stated aim of creating an administration that is as diverse as America. Because apparently executive positions in the corporate and financial sector are the only place you can find ethnic minorities in America. Groups from the far left throw out edicts, but these don't reflect the realities of the American experience or inequality, the racial wealth gap, and may prove counterproductive to diversify the administration and to implement policies that work for all Americans. New York Times is told by a member of the influential DC lobbying firm Mellman Castagnetti. Here's a David Sirota tweet. The New York Times just published an article insinuating that the government can only find qualified people of color on Wall Street, but not elsewhere. The New York Times is warning of the pressing danger of the Biden administration conceding too much to the far left at a time when progressive politicians have reportedly already been ruled out as candidates for cabinet positions due to concerns of appearing to be too far left, and when members of the Biden camp are already waving off demands from progressives using the phrase, "We don't negotiate with terrorists." We covered that a few days ago with Lauren Martinchek's article. Vox also has put out an article celebrating diversity without regard to policies or behavior titled, President-elect Joe Biden's transition team is one of the most diverse ever, subtitled, Biden wants his administration to look like America. His transition team is a start. This is me. If you've ever had any doubts about Vox's purpose in life, this should quell them. Vox is a corporate apologist, pure and simple. Vox's job 24/7 is to protect the establishment. Back to Vox. Thus far, 46% of Biden's transition staff are people of color and 41% of senior staff are people of color, Vox reports. More than half of the transition staff, 52%, are women and 53% of senior staff are women. Meanwhile, exactly 0% of them oppose war, nuclear brinksmanship, starvation sanctions, and imperialism. 0% oppose U.S. oligarchy or its sociopathic intelligence agencies. 0% support universal health care or redistributing the nation's immense wealth to end poverty in the United States. 0% support ending the drug war, ending the prison industrial complex, ending the U.S. police state, ending mass surveillance. 0% oppose Israeli apartheid, oppose internet censorship, oppose mass media propaganda via U.S. plutocracy. Real diversity in any government is of course important, but what you don't see Vox reporting on is the fact that Biden's transition and advisory teams are packed to the gills with corporate cronies and war whores. That's pretty good, war whores. I hope that one sticks. And that the women he's eyeing for key foreign policy positions are as murderous and depraved as any man anywhere on earth. They might be diverse in gender, skin color, and sexual orientation, but in terms of bloodshed, exploitation, and oppression, they couldn't be more homogenous. They are all devout acolytes of the murderous, imperialist, oligarchic religion that is the mainstream consensus of the U.S. political/media class. Caitlin was kind enough to boil this down into a tweet. 0% oppose war, 0% oppose oligarchy, 0% oppose sociopathic intelligence agencies, 0% oppose internet censorship, 0% oppose the drug war, 0% oppose the police state, 0% oppose mass surveillance, 0% oppose the prison industrial complex, 0% oppose Israeli apartheid. But that's all you're ever going to get out of the Democratic establishment. Taking away power from the warmongers, the war whores, and plutocrats in any way, shape, or form has been completely ruled out as a possibility, so all they have to offer in terms of progress is giving prominent positions to those few women, minorities, and LGBT individuals who happen to be fine with choking people to death with neoliberal austerity at home and dropping cluster munitions on children abroad. That's what progress looks like in a power establishment that is built on a foundation of violence, oppression, and theft. And of course, the people who will be hurt worst by it are members of those very same marginalized communities you're supposed to get excited about being elevated to Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Strategy or whatever under the Biden administration. They are hurt by the austerity policies. They are hurt by the authoritarian police state policies. They are hurt by the fact that they're the ones getting bombs dropped on them overseas. And they are hurt by the fact that there is still so very far to go in terms of racial and sexual equality, yet the thrust toward getting there is being diverted into a pussy hat parade for Susan Rice as Secretary of State. The most influential news reporting should be that which holds power to account and draws attention to its most malignant aspects. Instead, it is actively facilitating the most malignant aspects of power and hiding them under the banner of diversity. Glenn Greenwald makes a similar point in his latest System Update Extra.
Primarily, if not exclusively, when it comes to what the Biden administration is doing, with very little discussion of what the Biden administration will actually be doing and what these communication professionals have done in their career. And then we saw the same thing earlier today when one of Biden's most controversial appointees, about whom I wrote, the person who he wants to head the very important Office of Management and Budget, Neera Tanden, she gave a press conference today in which she described, just like she did in the viral tweet of yesterday, how when she was 5 years old, her father divorced her mother and she had to, for a few months or maybe a little longer, go on food stamps in order to buy food using food stamps. And this is supposed to signify, and she said explicitly, that this meant she was in touch with the common American. She understood the sanctity of social programs. It is a very warm story to listen to, even as somebody who has had very vociferous conflicts with Neera Tanden and who has nothing but loathing for her ideology and what she's done in her professional life. You listen to it and you can't help but be moved. It's designed to play on your emotions. But the reality is exactly the opposite. She essentially lived a very middle-class life, if not better. She ended up going to Yale Law School. She's worked at the highest levels of Democratic Party politics for the last 15 years at the side of Hillary Clinton when she was advocating the invasion of Iraq, and then as president of this think tank, the Center for American Progress, in which she has spent the last 10 years doing very little other than collecting millions of dollars from Wall Street, Silicon Valley, and Gulf state despots, the real constituency of the Democratic Party. But all the media coverage of her is about her childhood, about how she's one of the only women of color, I think, to ever be nominated for this position. And it's all designed to exploit concepts of social justice and diversity in order to get you to forget about what neoliberalism really is. I think the most manipulative example I can recall is in 2016, the GCHQ, which is the British counterpart of the National Security Agency that is responsible for spying on British citizens as well as people around the world. In fact, is one of the most aggressive agencies in the world when the NSA wants to do something but can't because of legal limits or ethical limits. It farms it out to the GCHQ that happily does it. It's probably the most invasive spying agency in the world, and yet once a year they bathe themselves literally in the colors of the rainbow flag to celebrate LGBT Day because of Alan Turing, the famed British spy and code breaker in World War II, who was in a closet and ultimately history discovered was gay. So they exploit the cause of LGBT equality in order to make you forget about how pernicious the spying agency is, just like the CIA has Women's Day and LGBT Day and Raytheon in general. Dynamic and Boeing and all of these weapons manufacturers do the same. It's all designed to get you to focus on social justice issues about which they don't care at all, and get you to believe that if they're good on those issues, they must be good people in general, when on the other hand, they are destroying people's economic security, engaging in policies of corporatism and militarism and imperialism and intervention and war. And because they've been able to snow and deceive so many people into focusing on the biography and the diversity of who the people are implementing these destructive policies to perpetuate status quo power, they get people to believe that there's something completely different than what they really are. And the more that works, the more women they recruit, or people of color, or African Americans, or LGBTs they recruit on their behalf to advocate for and implement these policies, the more they're going to continue to do that tactic until people tire of it. But clearly that isn't the case yet, since it's so pervasive throughout the Biden nominating process. It's what's driving it without question. And of course, you have media outlets more than happy to play along, in part because the propaganda is for the Democrats, but in part because it's much easier to talk about biography and diversity than it is to dig into who funds these people and on whose behalf they've been living their entire professional lives. That's one very visible and important trend from the Biden nomination process.
Glenn is gay? Do you think Biden might appoint him to his cabinet? Maybe if we hold our breath, Biden will appoint Glenn Greenwald to his cabinet. I don't think even I can hold my breath that long. So Glenn and Caitlin are talking about mainstream media. What about the supposed independents? What we've noticed is most of the lefty independents take their marching orders from Cenk Uygur. A lot of them even got their start there, like Jimmy Dore. Jimmy's always trying to hold the lefty pundits accountable. And it's fair to say that a lot of these lefty pundits are jumping on the diversity train and are celebrating some of Biden's picks because they're women or people of color or LGBTQ people. I wonder why this is happening. Seems like these sharp-eyed pundits would know that it's all a trick. Hey, I wonder if anyone's paying them to try to keep us sheepdogged into the DNC fold. Maybe Hillary Clinton is paying them. This is old news, but I don't think anyone's reporting on it. I know Jimmy Dore isn't reporting on it, even though he is trying to keep everyone accountable. Clinton team donated $20 million to the Young Turks. The so-called independent media network, the Young Turks, have been caught accepting a $20 million donation from the Clinton team. Let me ask you for a moment, dear viewers and listeners, where have you seen this reported? In the comments section, I'd love it if you could put anywhere else you've seen this story but here. This story is a few years old and still nobody seems to be talking about it. I found this on newspunch.com. Following Cenk Uygur's announcement that the $20 million donation would help bolster his media company, internet sleuths have discovered that the money originated from corporate Democratic sources, turning the independent organization into nothing more than a corporate establishment mouthpiece. TFP reports, the $20 million in funding is slated to be used to increase the size of the TYT newsroom and for business operations, but where did the money actually come from? It is important to note that TYT has reported on some hard-hitting stories and exposed serious problems within the state, and Uygur was unafraid of calling out corruption, so much so that he quit his job at MSNBC to work on the media project. However, once we start following the recent money, we can see a telling revelation begin to unfold. The funding comes from a number of sources, so let's take a look at these entities and the people behind them to better understand the agenda at play. The main conduit for the funding is a newly created growth equity fund called 3L Capital, with additional financial backing from venture capital groups Graycroft Partners, E Ventures, and WNDR Co., which was recently launched by Hollywood mogul Jeffrey Katzenberg. News is red hot right now, and being positioned on the progressive side of the coin has put us in a very good place, Uygur said, according to Bloomberg. Far from being an independent progressive news source, as they proclaim to be, the TYT network is now being supported by your run-of-the-mill corporatist Clinton money machine. Although attempting to publicly operate as an insurgent progressive activist outlet, think Bernie Sanders, I don't know about that. The financial backing by the aforementioned entities reveals something vastly different. Yeah, this is a few years ago. I don't know how many of you still think Bernie Sanders is an insurgent progressive activist. While you're commenting in the comment section, I'd be curious to know who you think is a progressive activist. I would include Glenn Greenwald. I would include Matt Taibbi. A few others, but not many. Richard Medhurst I would include. And Fiorella Isabel. Max Blumenthal and Ben Norton. And sometimes Aaron Mate. Aaron Mate kind of keeps one foot on each side of the divide. But all of the other supposedly independent pundits, I don't really think of that way. But again, I digress. The financial backing by the aforementioned entities reveals something vastly different. One need only look at who is behind the funding to understand the agenda being put into motion. 3L Capital is put together by hedge fund venture capitalist from the Netherlands, Dr. Peter Paul de Vries. Graycroft Partners, venture capital fund run by Alan Patrikoff. Patrikoff has been active in Democratic Party politics, contributing to candidates including Bill and Hillary Clinton, whom he met in the Hamptons when they were there guests of lobbyist and Democratic activist Liz Robbins. Graycroft Partners pumps money into the Clinton slush fund so their businesses can curry favor from the government in an effort to maximize profits on the companies they are invested in. Jeffrey Katzenberg, Hollywood mogul and film producer, Disney, DreamWorks Animation, Katzenberg has been actively involved in Democratic politics. He actively supported Barack Obama and has been called one of Hollywood's premier political kingmakers and one of the Democratic Party's top national fundraisers. So as I've said, he's basically a Clinton bundler. Jeffrey Dark Money Katzenberg. To give you an idea of how enmeshed Katzenberg is in run-of-the-mill corporatist Democratic Party politics, he co-hosted a fundraiser for President Obama at the home of actor George Clooney in May 2012, with the event reportedly raising nearly $15 million. Additionally, it was reported that Obama held a private meeting in Los Angeles on October 7, 2012, where he joined Bill Clinton at Katzenberg's Beverly Hills mansion along with several deep-pocketed Democratic donors. Oddly, members of the White House press corps who had traveled to California with Obama were not allowed into the home, but kept in the garage of Katzenberg's mansion, with one reporter calling the meeting unusual. Katzenberg, who had previously donated $2 million to the pro-Obama PAC Priorities USA Action, donated an additional $1 million in October 2012. Revealing that he is no progressive by any stretch of the imagination, Katzenberg tellingly donated $1 million to the super PAC Priorities USA, which supported Hillary Clinton in the 2016 presidential race. Furthermore, in June 2016, information released by WikiLeaks regarding leaked Democratic National Committee documents confirmed that Katzenberg donated $3 million to the Hillary Clinton campaign. Then in October 2016, he hosted a $100,000 per person fundraiser at his Beverly Hills residence with Obama as the main attraction. Does he sound like a true progressive in the style of Bernie, or something more akin to your run-of-the-mill corporatist Democratic Party insider? Let's call a spade a spade. Katzenberg's WNDR Co. is nothing more than a $500 million slush fund designed to buy up and promote faux progressive websites and YouTube channels with the intent of having them operate as an echo chamber meant to bolster corrupt liberal corporatist candidates like Hillary Clinton and like Joe Biden. Essentially, they work to normalize their corporatist establishment candidates in places where Bernie supporters frequent. Not sounding so progressive anymore, huh? The idea that someone with such a strong track record of support for the Clinton machine and Obama, like Katzenberg, is actually working to help real progressives and progressive ideas come to the forefront of American political discourse is patently absurd. Ironically, Cenk still attempts to maintain that he is against money in politics, completely failing to mention that his newest corporate owners have shoveled millions of dollars into the pockets of Hillary and Obama, both standard bearers for the corporatist brand of Democratic Party politics. The reality of the situation is that mega-rich corporatist Democratic backers aren't investing in TYT Network to turn a new leaf. These vulture capitalist outfits are buying influence within progressive outlets like Young Turks as a means of indoctrinating their audiences prior to the next election cycle, with hopes they can undermine the next Bernie. And from what I can see, that's going to be AOC. It's worth noting that TYT actually supported Bernie in the primaries. They'll probably support AOC in the next primaries. So when super rich centrists invest $20 million into the company, one must wonder if this is to support them or to change their messaging in an effort to keep them from promoting real progressives like Bernie during the next election cycle. Buying up leading progressive influence sites like the Young Turks is an ingenious strategy by the oligarchy to maintain control of political discourse in the United States. And this is me again. It's especially ingenious when so many of the lefty pundits follow Cenk's example. It seems obvious that the Clinton machine has a strategy in place to prevent the rise of the next Bernie Sanders, and Uygur seems more than content to sell out his progressive base to standard corporatist Democratic control. Make no mistake, these Clinton cronies are buying influence in progressive outlets in an effort to maintain power for the political and financial elite. The oligarchy refuses to allow for political discourse to manifest organically and are working diligently to propagandize the public. If you get a chance to read this article again, I've listed it in the information section below. Click on this video at the end of it. I've featured this video in previous episodes. In the meantime, stay on high alert for media trickery, whether it comes from mainstream sources or from supposed independents.